welcome to Candid Conversation Season 3. This is Mwangi Chege, and this is where we enlighten minds, inspire people, and enrich lives. Tonight is yet another exciting night where we will be talking about the path to recovery. And this, we will be focusing especially on matters addiction. Many people have struggled with different types of addiction, but to just unravel all this and make us understand more, especially about matters relapse, is none other than our guest here on studio, Jane Gatia. Karibu sana, Madam Jane. Kindly introduce yourself and tell us more about yourself.
Thank you. My name is Jane Gatia. I'm a counseling psychologist by profession, and I love my job. I'm proud to be associated with game changers, and particularly those who impact on life like Outburst Limited. So I'm glad to be here. I counsel people, and I am very, very concerned about making the world a better place than I found it.
And asante sana, Daktari. Now, Dr. Jane, just tell us a little bit more about addiction.
Oh, a very important question there. Yes, addiction is really a problem, it's a challenge. It is actually considered to be a disease. Whenever a person gets addicted to, let's say, drugs, a lot of people in the world are addicted to drugs, addicted to food, addicted to other habitual practices, which they are unable to break away from. And particularly if the addiction interferes with the normal running of a person's life, that becomes a disease. It's actually a disease which is more behavioral than otherwise, even though at times that may also interfere with the general wellness of the person.
So there are many people who have struggled, especially with alcoholism and drug addiction, to mention but a few. And what we have seen over time is that families sometimes spend a fortune to try, rehabilitate them, or rather take them to a rehabilitation center, but it keeps going back. What could the problem be?
That's a very important question. If we may narrow down to addiction to drugs, you realize that a lot of people get addicted, first of all, in a very, very gradual way. Sometimes people think it's fun to try that first sip of alcohol, something that they took a puff of, whichever way they started it. And at first it may have looked like, oh, I'm just trying out, it's just fun. I think I need to do what my peers are doing. We are just enjoying ourselves without knowing that slowly one can easily get addicted to it. There's something we call genetic predisposition. And a person can actually get addicted, especially to drugs like alcohol, if they already have that genetic material that gets triggered. Eventually, it becomes a problem with time and gradually, without the person realizing that they're actually getting themselves into the deep end. And once they are in the deep end, now that is when we say the person is either dependent on drugs or they are addicted completely, and they are unable to operate without the power that is derived from that particular substance. So that is the level of addiction.
So many a times when you look at our society today, you find young people who cannot go to work before passing, through an alcohol den, or like you put it, have a puff of something. So how can these people be helped? Because it looks like addiction is a trap. It's like they're in a prison. What is the best way to help these people?
I consider that a very important question and observation. When people are trapped, so to call it, as you put it very well, when a person is trapped, they actually need help. We say that the person eventually got into the addiction pit, again, to put it that way, slowly. They need a similar journey, and actually longer journey, once they begin to, make a decision. The first step is to make that decision. And the realization that they are trapped, they no longer have free will to do their things. They are no longer able to operate without the power of the drugs. Actually, when a person gets addicted or dependent on a substance, it alters the way our brains operate. That brain anatomy is completely, altered, and the brain will always be kind of craving. So when we talk about craving, it's because the brain is unable to operate normally without the substance, because the substance ideally takes over the brain, the normal operations of the brain. So the realization that the person is no longer able to operate without the substance is the first step. The second step is to make that conscious decision. The person has to be willing. Remember, this is a personal matter. And one has to be willing completely to enter the journey that we call the recovering journey. It's actually recovering in the sense that no one ever will have their lives the same again as it was before they abuse the substance. But that doesn't mean that there's no hope. There is a lot of hope, but one has to wake up, kind of do like, put off the dust and start the journey. It is called the journey of recovering. So that is one thing that must be done among others that will follow.
Are there things, Dr. Jane, that can we can look at and know that this particular person has made a decision and they are willing to start the journey of recovery before we engage too much, before we invest too much? Are there signs that this person is willing to actually change?
Yes, and that is very important, because ideally you cannot get help unless you are willing to receive that help. It is a willing person and another one who is also ready to give the help. So one has to realize the damage that the drugs have done. There is that self-confession. It's a personal commitment, and that personal commitment has to be confessed. The person has first of all to see themselves as completely beaten, hearts down, as it were. The person has to be able to even talk of why they want to get out of that, drugs addiction. And that confession is what you do the thing. I would even say is what you do the magic. Because the person, anything else that follows, the person will be able to engage. It's a tough journey and requires resilience and it requires determination. It's just like one would wake up and decide, I want to go to Mombasa, I'm in Nairobi. And that decision is the first thing. And the next step is mapping out, how do I get to Mombasa if I'm in Nairobi? And you have to do the necessary things, and you have to be guided. Where do you buy an air ticket, for instance? Where do you get a bus ticket? And then the journey begins. But you have to be ready for 5-6 hours down the line, down the road, if you take the road, and so on and so forth. The same thing will apply to recovering from drugs addiction, and ideally any other form of addiction.
Dr. Jane, will ask you a question that many people have asked me about people, and the question is, do people change? When you're thinking about people who have uh, been people living with addictions, are there, do we have success stories going forward?
Wow, what a question, and a good question there. Yes, there is hope. I say there is hope, and that is very consistent. That we have people who are actually down, had hit rock bottom, and they were able to rise up. It's just a question of making a conscious decision, a very personal decision, and personal commitment, and be willing to get a few bumps along the way. The road of recovering from drugs addiction is rough. It's not a walk in the park, but the work has to be done for one to achieve what they want to achieve. So there are success stories. There are many people in the world who hit the very hard rock bottom, but they are up the mountain and they are saying, come on, you can also get here. We can climb this, just like climbing Mount Kenya, for instance, in Kenya, or Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. It's not an easy thing. Those who have done would say it's not easy, but they have done it. So it's possible. There is hope and a lot of hope. But always remember, it's a personal commitment, requires resilience, requires patience, because it's a journey and the end is not too near. But successful stories are there, and there is hope.
I like that there's a hope for you out there who is struggling with any type of addiction, and that truly you can make a decision and change and turn around and become what you've always wanted to become. We will take a break, and when we come back, we will be looking on the challenges on the path of recovery. Why some people, don't get there, and why others do, and how you can get there. Stay tuned to Candid Conversations Season 3. Welcome back to Candid Conversation. We are hanging out here at Hotel Troy on Magadi Road, just after Galleria. What a nice place it is. We are hanging out here with Dr. Jane Gatia, who is a psychologist, and has been helping us to understand more about the path to recovery for a person living with any type of addiction. But just to ask you, Dr. On the path of recovery, there must be many hurdles. So what are some of these challenges that the people living with an addiction encounter?
That's a very important question. Yes, there is always a cost and probably a price to pay for the past, and especially if it's an ugly past. And any form of addiction, particularly drugs addiction, has its own ugly past. And it means when a person is trying to kind of like rewind the clock of their lives, they need to deal with a few things. Top on the list is always the guilt. A person recovering or who has made a decision to start the journey of recovery or recovering They usually will feel very guilty about many things. They recall the time they fought under influence of the substance. Could it be alcohol? Could it be other substances? There is always the money that has been spent. Sometimes we say gone up into waste or gone down into the dustbin. Yes, the drain, as it were. So the person that you denied an opportunity even to progress because of that selfishness, because drugs, addiction to drugs always cause a kind of tendency to be very mean. And the person's life is so self-centered. They only think about themselves. And so there could have been an opportunity lost by someone because you didn't do what you needed to do. So all that and much more, maybe job lost, probably an accident that was very fatal that occurred when you are under influence of some substances, especially alcohol, pathway accidents, so many scars on yourself, and so on. The list is quite endless. And those who have suffered addiction, they know that is not a list that can be done in one day. So now, to deal with all that, one has to be able to tell themselves that it's not a matter of sitting there feeling guilty, because that will not help. You just have to wake up. Take it, for example, if one got an accident, especially cycling, maybe the simplest example. If you fell off your bicycle, you don't sit there. You'll be knocked. Once things will happen, especially if you are on a highway. So you just have to wake up, pull out from the road, including even motor vehicle accidents. We do the same. Try to pull out from the road, and then you'll get help. And you'll still drive. You'll still drive again and again, and you become better than before. And forget about the accidents. That phobia would only ground the person. The same thing with addiction to drugs. You must wake up, forget about the rest. Really, maybe not forgetting, but put it behind you. It will always be there. There will be things to remind you about the same, but you have to move forward. And particularly, if you feel like you owe too much to people, you can always apologize. You can always ask for forgiveness. Maybe that will help a bit to deal with the guilt. And once you confess and you ask for forgiveness, your work is done. Move forward. That's what I would say.
On the path of recovery, or the path to recovery, there is a place for the person who was living with the addiction. And then there is the place for the caregivers, the people who are supporting him towards this journey. What are some of the challenges that the caregivers also might face?
Yes, the caregivers are the persons who are supporting this particular individual, and it is good to recognize that persons addicted to drugs have a disease. If we may imagine that you cannot abandon a patient, a medical patient that you have. If you are the caregiver, you will do the best that you can. Take the patient to hospital, help them to take medication, support them even physically, give you a material, and so on. It's also a commitment on the side of the caregiver, on the side of the family members, on the side of friends, on the side of workmates. It's a commitment because a person recovering from drugs addiction requires high-level support. They need to be shown love. They need to be shown acceptance because they have been away and isolated, due to their behavior. So they need to be received and they need to be supported. But it's also important for the caregivers to learn how to forgive. It's not a question of, remember that day, remember what you did, you took away my money, you lied to me, you caused an accident, and my car was a write-off. All that is not important stuff. It doesn't help. So it's a question of also letting go and supporting the person in the best way possible, while also avoiding to be an enabler. Because enabling sometimes comes in along the way and then makes the person to relapse. So learn just to support, let go, both of you, two willing people, but the support of the caregiver is critically important.
I really like that point, Dr. Jane, that you made about loving this person and forgiving them. Because I think most of the time, what we are unable to do is to forgive, and we keep reminding people of the things that they did. And so it's very good to know that that is one of the things that we need to avoid. So let's take a scenario, Dr. Jane, that here is a person who has committed themselves that to walk away from their addiction and to change. And then there is this other person who is their caregiver, who is also committed to the process, okay, for whatever it takes, whether it's their willpower, they have forgiven them, they have chosen to even pay. I know it costs a lot of money in the path of recovery, and hopefully that, like you had said earlier, people change. So there are those who turn around and their lives change. But then, unfortunately, there are those other stories that there's cases of what you have termed relapse, going back to the same old ways. In a layman's term, what could be the causes of relapse?
Well, that's a good question and a very important observation. Yes, relapse happens quite a lot. We need to remember that the journey to recovering is a very slippery road. I would like to imagine a slippery road that is not tarmacked, and we have seen how wheels of a car can spin on such a road. It's muddy. Sometimes even help is needed to help this driver to push the car and get it off the mud. So the road is slippery, and there could be those parts of the road that the person may just spin wheels and look like they're stuck. They still need a push. So there are many reasons why that may happen. Of course, bearing in mind the nature of the road, triggers are many along the way. Let's take, for example, the places, the environment. A person who is on a journey of recovery, they need to be, they need not to be exposed to the same substance or different substance, because there is also a kind of moving from one chemical or alcohol to something else, if what is available is what you satisfy them. Remember, this person is struggling with cravings, sometimes with withdrawal, and all those imaginations of how life was before. So they are making a turnaround. So triggers like the environment. If a person was struggling with alcohol addiction at some point, and now they want to get out, and then someone comes with the alcohol, the same thing, and sit with them somewhere and begin to use their drink, that is a very big assumption that this person cannot be triggered. So it is good for the person to be out of an environment where substances are being taken or used. Of course, there are those normal drinkers, like in the case of alcohol, and there are those now we are categorizing abnormal drinkers because they have been addicted and their lives have been ruined completely by the drug, by the alcohol. So they need to keep off. They need to keep off that company. That is a question of finding new relations of persons who are sober, persons who are keeping, sober, and people who are not drinking at all. So that is a way of ensuring that the person on the recovery journey does not spin wheels and does not get stuck. It is also very important. I've talked about company. Keep off that company. Keep off that place, that pub, that the joints, keep off those joints. That is one way of telling the brain that this behavior is no longer wanted. And once that communication with the brain is made, there is something we call a neurotransmission, kind of reversal. And once that reversal is made, then the brain develops a different way of adjusting and adapting without the drug. So that is very important. Of course, the drug should be out of sight completely, but also getting busy with more helpful, activities. When people are addicted to drugs, they don't think about anything else. All that goes on in their head is about how they'll get that drug, satisfy themselves, feel good, and relax. So they need to get busy, do meaningful activities, engage in social work, try to give a helping hand somewhere. And that gives a lot of satisfaction that it is not just receiving, it is also giving. And that helps a lot to keep the person going.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm just imagining with me that there is a caregiver out there who has worked so hard to support their loved one through the recovery path, and then they keep relapsing. What would you tell them?
They have to be encouraged. Caregivers suffer as much as the person addicted to drugs. And I talked about, I want to talk about resilience. As a caregiver, you too is on this journey. If a person wanted to climb a mountain and the journey there is rough, and you are the one who seem to know the journey to climbing that mountain, you don't have also to walk through that rough road. So it requires patience, forgiving. Don't count the price. The value of this person's life is always more important. You have to let go. Maybe someday they may be able to pay back, not necessarily at the same level, not in the same amount, but you can let go and put priority to the life of this person. If you saved that life, definitely it will make you happier. And by the way, for the caregivers, people who give and support others, positive psychologists have established that they live longer, they live healthier, they keep depression away, and they are also able to be happier generally, and they keep a general wellness. So learn to give, learn to support as a caregiver. Make it your kind of responsibility, like it's a job that you have, a job without pay, just like we bring up children without knowing what we expect at the end of it. So just give and support. The frustrations may be very many, but sit back, take another breath if that's what it requires, rejuvenate yourself, and move on. And hit the road of supporting like you have never done before.
I like that the path to recovery is actually a journey of resilience. And Dr. Jane, so this person who has been very willing to change and has been supported and has come out victorious, and we really are hoping and praying that they do not relapse. Apart from going for Kesha and praying for them and with them, what are the other things that they also just need to be aware of so that they can change completely and not turn back?
Yes, it is important that the person realizes, the person recovering from addiction needs to realize that the relapse can come at any point. I would even call it sabotage. The sabotage can, from that force of, wanting to get back, can happen anytime. And being awake, being just, aware and paying attention to the triggers on the way is very, very important. So the person must be determined to say no. That self-assertiveness is very, very important. Other life skills that the person requires is something like conflict resolution. You have to learn how to resolve conflicts, because even getting onto the road, onto the path of recovering from drugs addiction in itself is a conflict. There is an intrapersonal conflict, and it has to be sorted out. You have to learn to negotiate. You have to learn to manage anger, because also recovering from that journey of recovery causes a lot of anger, especially the feeling of failure. I've failed, and so on and so forth. So it is critical that the person manages to stay stress-free in terms of try to minimize the stressors. Don't go to those places. Don't engage with those people who are likely to cause anger, who are likely to stress you. Don't do things that will stress you. Try as much, and then ensure that you get busy. Get to work. If you are not working effectively, get to work. Be with the people who are sober. That is very, very important. It's almost like a manual to follow, and much more. And that way, the person you keep on the journey longer, they'll keep going.
Is there a time duration where we can say, if I went to rehab and it has been X number of years, that now I am safe and I have bounced back to, for lack of a better word, my normal life? Is there any time duration?
That's a very important question. Unfortunately, no. We cannot say that since I've been off alcohol, I've been off other drugs, I have done 5 years down the line, I've done 10, 20. By the way, people do even 20 years, and one day something goes wrong, and they get back into the trench, into the deep end of where they really hoped they would never be. So there is no safe zone in terms of the number of years. It is every day waking up and telling oneself, I made it yesterday, today I will. So it's constant resilience, it's constant patience, it's constant self-assurance. So that's why we call it the journey of recovering. We are recovering every day and not really recovered. None is recovered. We can only be on the journey for that long. We don't know the end of the journey. Really, it has no duration. It is, we got into it, and it's like we've got now to keep going on the other road, and we are not sure how long it would take.
It reminds me of the saying that we like to put it, that life is a journey, and so truly the life, the pathway to recovery for persons who are been in an addiction is quite a life, a journey, and they need support, and they also need a very strong will. For me, what I've gotten tonight is a few things. That one, you need to change your environment. Two, you need to change your company. And three, you need to be resilient. You have to be persistent and consistent. And what a night it has been, Dr. Jane Gatia. It's always a privilege to host you. We can never get enough of your wisdom. But kindly tonight, give us your parting shot.
Well, I just want to encourage those persons who are struggling with addiction, especially drugs, addiction to drugs. It's very important that you make a decision. There is hope. There is hope that you can bounce back, and the world can be a better place for you. And furthermore, you can also make the world a better place because of your decision. For the caregivers, never give up. giving up is not an option. We have many other options to support the person, to keep going, so that the world becomes a better place, particularly for our youth. The youth need to hear this message from A to Z, and they need to look for that help and run as fast as they could from addiction to drugs. If they saw the signs, just run as fast as you could away from that, trap, because it's a new trap. And help others. Together, we can make Kenya a better country, and ultimately, we can make the international community a better place.
Lastly, Dr. Jane, could you kindly direct a few people on where they can get help?
Yes, I am a counseling psychologist by profession, and I have been doing my counseling work with diligence. I love my job. I definitely want to see the community living a better life. I practice in Nairobi, in the capital city of Kenya. You can find me near Jivanji Gardens. There's an office. I practice in an office I call East Africa Institute of Professional Counseling. And I would like you to note East Africa Institute of Professional Counseling. That's where we do the job, and you can come there with hope, and there is hope for you. I also train counselors, those who are also making the journey to recovering or on the journey of recovery. You can also take a short course in counseling, even in addiction counseling, and you could go out there and help your peers and help many more to make this world a better place. Welcome on board. Let's keep sober and let's help one another. My name is Jane Gatia, and I'm proud to be Kenyan. I'm even more proud to be able to say what I'm saying now.
There you have it, folks. It has been quite a night here at Hotel Troy off Magadi Road. I have learned so much tonight, but most importantly is that as you change, as you desire to change and make the steps to change, then you will go out there and make the world a better place. This has been your host, Mwangi Chege, here at Candid Conversations. Keep it live, keep it locked. Next week, same time, same place, and let's make the world a better place. Thank you. Good night.